Gals are with Save Women's Sports, and I have a fun interview to bring to you today. I have my friend Charlie Rae. We are in North Carolina to testify yesterday, don't know when we're going to upload this, to HB 358, and that is the Save Women's Sports Act. I met Charlie online through her activism work. She's an independent journalist. You want to tell them a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am an independent journalist. I live in Raleigh. I've been writing for about 6 years. And I've been writing about gender and like this whole transgenderism issue for probably about 5. One of the reasons that I kind of picked up was like I suffered from gender dysphoria when I was a child.
So that's how you kind of got in on this early, and for 5 years now I've been working on it.
Yeah, right. And like where the platform came from too, because just even like testifying for this bill, it's very obvious that like people want me to testify because I had dysphoria, which like I don't agree with. Like I don't think we should be believing people just because they experience something. But I do understand. Yeah.
Your voice is important.
Yeah.
It needs to be heard because as everyone knows that it often gets censored, or people like you are kind of bullied into silence, like we're seeing with athletes all the time. And you were an athlete. Tell people about your athletics.
Yeah, so I was the first whole half of my life was just athletics completely. So I started Taekwondo when I was about 4, and I earned my black belt when I was like 8. And I also was a competitive swimmer at the age of 5. I think we started competitive swimming. But I also
That's
did.
Intense.
Yeah. We loved it. The whole family was like a sports family. Like I did softball, t-ball up to softball. My mom was like the coach, and my mom did softball when she was in high school.
Oh, okay.
So she kind of like brought us into it. Yeah. And so, but I also like tried everything too. Like I did gymnastics for 5 years. I did dancing for 3 years, I think. I just kind of like dabbled in everything. So I loved sports it was my entire life.
So this is you as close to home as you.
Yes, for sure. And also, also I'd say like I've had a lot of experience with mixed sex sports. Like in Taekwondo, we work with.
Sure,
so that's why
you do some co-ed stuff, and you can realize those you saw firsthand.
Right.
Differences.
Exactly. Like watching a dude kick a girl in the throat, like by accident, just because he's kind of tall. It changes the way that you think about everything.
What could happen? Yeah.
So
there are so many risks behind allowing male-bodied people to compete in female sports and to enter into normally sex-separated spaces.
Yeah. And then you have titles, which is like, social recognition, possibly scholarships and financial resources, sponsorships. Yeah. But then you have contact sport, which is like Fallon Fox, who like broke the
Yeah, Fallon broke the orbital bone and split open the skull. Tamika Brent, and Tamika said that afterwards she never felt so overpowered in her life. And one thing that people don't really know is that Fallon hid their status until they were about to be outed just before that fight. Tamika did not know that she was going to be facing a male.
I didn't know that either.
She chose to still fight, and that's what happened.
Wow, I didn't know that either. Yeah, and I've looked into all this stuff. Yeah.
The first few women that Fallon fought did not know.
Okay, interesting.
And I think as women, we should have a right to know
of course
what we're facing when we get into the ring of all places.
Yeah, contact sports.
Let alone in the bathroom, because to me, or in the locker room, to me, that's a bigger threat to my safety. As a survivor of sexual abuse and domestic abuse, I think it's hard for some people to realize the threat you feel and how safe you feel when you go into a sex-separated space, and know that threat possibly isn't there. It's a small possible threat, but just to know it's gone, and I have the right to confront a male body if they're in that space. The thought of that to be gone is just shattering. Let alone all the record books. These records, like these boys are setting in Connecticut, there's no asterisk by their name to say this was a male-bodied individual. Generations of girls will look up at that board and go, dang it, I'm just not trying hard enough. Thinking and basically killing themselves, hurting their bodies training, because we know that happens with female athletes. We can go into early osteoporosis, lose our fertility, all sorts of things, right?
And that's the thing that people don't realize. Like, they kept saying that at the hearing. They were like, what's the big deal if kids like age 8 play soccer together? And it's like, do you realize how hard it is to be an athlete? Like, when I was in Taekwondo, I went every single day for like 2 hours. I like taught classes. I had to go to the tournaments. It's just like you dedicate your life to it, right? It's like it's tooth and nail. Like that's what your life is. You have a gritty life, and then to get to the end of it, like to have all those hours and hours of like grit and practice, and then to get to a tournament and be like, I'm fighting a guy. I'm never gonna win. It's just like. It's not superfluous. Like, people think it's just like, oh, what's the big deal? And it's just like, you don't know what it takes to be an athlete, do you? Like
these cyclists that spoke out as soon as their world championship was taken away by a male.
Yeah.
I mean, they just got harassed online.
Yeah.
And isn't it just crazy the environment that we're in, that people do not feel safe to speak up?
And just completely dismiss them. Like, just shut up. And it's just like, they worked their whole lives to do that.
Why are we listening to the feelings and making laws based on the feelings of this small percentage of people?
Right.
We're not even listening to this huge percentage of people, let alone the facts.
Yeah. Well, and if feelings matter, why don't women's feelings matter that they're upset?
Why do their feelings override ours? And why do our rights end where their feelings begin?
Right. And that's a consistent thing, because apparently trans women are like allowed to be afraid to go into male bathrooms, but like we're not allowed to be afraid.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, yeah, there's a lot
Another
of
double standard in sports. Often when we're drug tested, women who get to menopausal age are not allowed to take hormone replacements to help them with that complete hormone shift that basically throws your body out of whack. So that they can still train ideally, but these men identifying as women are allowed to take a cocktail of drugs that allows them to age ideally, basically, and allow continued training. So I think that's why we're seeing more and more older athletes now coming in too. They see what they can get. And now that college athletes are going to be able to be incentivized, you know, the NCAA better watch out. Pretty soon they're not even going to be needed. And athletes are just going to be running their own show.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. People at the hearing kept talking about how there was no incentive, that nobody would ever like want to do that, and it's just like,
I think we all know out there are coaches that as soon as they see that can give their team an advantage, will be pushing that.
Especially the higher you go.
And if the university down the road all of a sudden has 3 boys on their track team and they're scooping up all the sponsorships and opportunities, they're going to follow suit, and they're going to have no choice. We have to stop this before we open a floodgate that we just can't close. Because how do we take it back? I totally understand. I mean, we both have compassion for people suffering with gender dysphoria and going through these issues, but that doesn't mean that we can't protect our rights.
Or it doesn't mean that we have to pretend that there's no incentive to do this. You know what I mean? Like, that's another thing they kept saying over and over again, was like, nobody would just choose to be trans and want to do it. And like, to me, that's such a crazy thing to say, because there's this idea that like trans people are not accepted. But as somebody who speaks against this issue, I see it as the opposite. It's like every corporation is coming out. Yesterday at the hearing, most people that were there, the public that was coming to speak, supported trans people. So I don't really understand where this idea is coming from, that trans people aren't supported in society and therefore there would be no incentive, because in my view, trans people are extremely supported in society. They're platformed. They're like put on the news. They are
platformed.
So it's like there's no incentive, but you might be on the news just for being trans. So we have to stop. There's this like reality shielding because of feelings, you know, because people like don't want to make people who identify as trans feel bad, I guess. But like, how far is that going to go before we recognize like the actual consequences, like the incentives for taking away women's sports?
So Charlie, you came and testified yesterday for HB 358. What was that experience like? Was that your first time testifying for a bill?
Yeah, that was my first time testifying. It was definitely an interesting experience. Like, I liked going with you, so it's like if I had to go alone, I think it would have been a little more nerve-wracking.
It's nice to have the support. I'm really glad I was there.
Yeah, and like watching you do it over time, you know, like I've seen you do it on YouTube, and I watched you at the press conference, and so like being able to, I don't know, it inspired me.
I hope I make it relatable.
Yeah,
because I am just an average person.
Yeah.
And everybody has the right to be in my shoes.
Mm-hmm. Well, you told me that. You were like, anyone can testify. And I was like, oh, okay. And it's like, I should have known that.
I think the average American would assume you would have to be like an expert or something. But these are public hearings. You have every right to go, take pictures, record. Document, speak up.
Well, and I think people assume if they're not an expert, then they shouldn't speak up because they're not like the main person
but they're who matters the most, right?
Right.
And if you don't want to speak up at the hearing, call your representative, call the bill sponsor, give them support, call the opposition, tell them let's have a conversation with Save Women's Sports and people like us civilly, right?
And
Because we're often not given a seat at the table even.
And when we went lobbying, like, I was surprised that, like, a couple of the Democratic senator that we sat down and talked to, she was extremely nice to me, and that motivates me to be like, okay, I think I might want to have more conversation.
It really isn't a partisan issue. They're really creating these motives and agendas to it when we're simply protecting females, and everyone can see that. It's not a Democrat thing. It's not a religious thing. I know I am often painted as a conservative Christian just because I work with like family policy groups and stuff, but I work with everyone. I work with radical feminists, I work with Catholics, you know, but I'm not a religious person. I grew up with a religious background, but I'm not a religious person. I don't hold party ties. I'm just an average person who believes in what I believe in.
And that's the most important thing, I think, for everyone to realize about testifying or being a part of this is, like, all you need to have is something to say. It's just like lining out the consequences of what's going to happen to this, or how it impacts you, or like how you see it impacting society. Like, you don't need to be an expert. You just need to have something to say about that.
Just use your voice.
Exactly. So,
and it can be kind of scary.
Right? It was a little scary.
It can be intimidating when there's a whole crowd of opposition there, scoffing and clapping and mumbling behind your back, but it's also empowering. Isn't it?
Yes, it's both. It's definitely both. And so I actually had the dual experience where, because at the press conference we didn't have any opposition, and then yesterday at testifying we did have opposition, so I had the mixed experience, you know, and it was like, both were empowering. It was jarring, like, it was like the peanut gallery behind me, they're like scoffing and like talking under their breath and like getting really upset, and it was like making me nervous because it's, you know, like, it's like you can feel that
it's an intense feeling as a human. You can feel that energy.
That they don't like you. You can feel that. Like, for example, they wouldn't look me in the eye. To just like stand in the hallway that nobody would like even look at you. It's just like a bizarre feeling, you know? And so, but it also is very empowering because, realizing that like, I'm an average citizen, everyone's an average citizen, we can just go speak our voices. And like, especially knowing that like people in the legislature, there was a couple people in the legislature that were asking questions that seemed like they were kind of on the fence, you know? And so like being able to just show up and be like, hey, this is what I see happening, it is empowering.
And I think it's really refreshing to the legislators to have average people coming in, because we aren't lobbyists. Really, we were lobbying, but we're just average people, and they're used to having these people who it's their job to come in and try and convince them to vote this way or that way, and we're just speaking our truth. And there's a lot of power that comes with that honesty, and I think that's why we do get attacked. They're trying to bully us into silence because they know the power we have. We're women, we're strong, we need to use our voice. And you're proof of that we both are, that, you know, you can do so much.
And you inspired me, honestly, so.
Which is really crazy for me to think, because I'm just an average woman who
I'm just a writer.
Website and went with it. And, you know, when you have passion and live with integrity and intensity, it can get you places.
You just go and speak the truth, and I love your talking points. It's simple, repeated, it's simple. It has nothing to do with hate. It's
a clear, common sense issue, and it's silly that I even need to be here, right? Because I think even 6-year-olds on the playground can see the differences in between boys and girls. It's a common sense thing,
and that's why I think like it's just showing up and telling people this is what I think is happening is powerful at this moment. I don't think people are looking at the consequences. It's very emotional. It's like trans kids are going to hurt themselves, and like we're going to refuse people from society, and it's like we all need to slow down and just, like you're doing, outline the consequences, repeat them. They're basic common sense. It's very simple. And just continue to tell the public. Like, I think that's the point that we're at now, which is why like,
awareness
gaining
is a
traction.
key part of the issue. Because until it hits home, it's something that you don't really realize what's going on.
Oh, women's rights are being eradicated.
What?
How?
If I go to that contest tomorrow, I have to compete against a guy?
Like I have no chance of winning at all. Like, why am I competing?
And they're saying that it's a non-issue.
Yeah.
I have moms emailing me telling me their daughters aren't competing the next year because they're fed up with it.
I wouldn't have.
So go ahead and tell me it's a non-issue. It's a non-issue because you're silencing the people that are trying to speak out. And we're not going to let that happen anymore.
Yeah.
I'm putting my stake in the ground. We are not going to compromise, and we won't be bullied.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's just so simple. And I get, like, especially when we're talking about Democrats are supposed to want to support women's rights. You know, so it's like, yeah, why would we be bullied at the end of the day? We're talking about our rights. And so we need our rights. We'll just repeat that.
What would you tell someone out there who's thinking about being in your shoes and testifying for the first time?
Oh, okay. So I guess sit down and think about the opposition. That was the most that I took out of yesterday when I was testifying, that like I did love what I said, but I really like want to sit down almost and like tailor my responses to their arguments.
You can learn a lot from their arguments.
Right. So for
and
example,
they can be shut down pretty quickly.
Right, they can. And we just have to do a little bit of thinking and know that they're coming. So one of the things everyone kept talking about yesterday was how the bill was like a violation of privacy rights, because in order to support the bill you would need to check people's genitals.
They think it's a show me your genitals bill.
Right.
Is their spin they like to put on it.
Right.
And we all know if you are an athlete in the United States, you have to have a physical before you can play activities.
Right.
And that is simply what it is.
Yeah.
It's no extra step to any athlete. Mm-hmm. It's simply what the doctor says, what your birth certificate says. It's your sex.
Yeah. Yeah. It's on your birth certificate. Like, nobody needs to
we're
check
asking
anything.
For
Yeah.
Sex, not gender, in sports.
Yeah. But the whole point is that, like, it's not supposed to be a checks and balances system. It's supposed to be a precedent, so that if you are on a sports team and a guy comes in, you can go to the faculty and say, hey, there's a guy there. Like, I don't think he's supposed to be there. But if the policy says he's allowed to be there, you can't do that, right? So it's not about like checking everyone's genital that walks through the door. It's about the precedent of being able to go to faculty or the overlying administration and be like, hey, this shouldn't be allowed. And then they would remove that person. So, yeah.
As you mentioned in your testimony yesterday, if we allow males to continue to compete in female sports, we're removing women's rights to say discrimination is happening.
Exactly.
When we replace sex with gender identity, we then don't have a right to say it's wrong.
Exactly.
Hello?
Yes, you could have two entire teams that are all biological males, and women would not be able to claim discrimination. We would be told, oh, there's a women's team, it's right there.
You know, there's a good fictional book that recently came out that talks about that. It's called Transgender Hoops.
Yeah,
and it's about a basketball team that is with boys. So I'll just leave it at that. You can check that out.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it may seem like an exaggeration or really being over dramatic, but it will happen down the road when, like we said before, when coaches see they can win, when they can get that esteem from it, there will be entire teams of male, female teams.
Yeah.
How do you even say that? This
Especially
is so crazy.
the higher you go. The higher you go, the more incentive there is. Collegiate level, there's incentive. Above that, there's incentive.
It's absurd that we even need to be here, isn't it, Charlie?
It is, absolutely.
Yeah, so you would encourage other people to come and testify, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's not as scary as you think.
Seems. Yeah. So use your voice. Even if you just come and testify, if you're not an athlete, you can say, I know what women's sports means to women and I support this bill. That's all you gotta do. If you can't come and testify, make sure to contact the representatives. If you can't use your voice in that way, you can use your pocketbook and donate to us financially to help cover our traveling costs. You can go to savewomensports.com/shop. That has places to donate. We also have PayPal, Venmo, and come find me on Patreon. Best Stelzer. Charlie, it was awesome to be here with you.
I'm so glad to have you in Raleigh, and I hope you come back.
Southern hospitality was fantastic.
Thank you for inspiring me to do this. Yeah.
All right. See you later, everyone.